recording. Someone wants to come here, I think. I'm not really sure. Okay. I want to share with sound. All right, so let's get started. So as you can hear, someone apparently is trying to get into my apartment. I don't know who that is. Okay, they're gonna have to wait, unfortunately. Okay, so so this week we are moving on to yet another chapter. We are all the way up to chapter 6. Good afternoon. So another week, another chapter. So a couple of announcements. First off, before I get to this announcement, this past Sunday was the day that all of the assignments were finally due. And there was a few of you that didn't complete all of the assignments. So I don't know, someone is trying to get into my apartment. Okay, I think that they left. Apologize for that. But that was a very aggressive Amazon delivery person. So anyways, okay, so yeah, so this Sunday, all of the assignments were due. There was a number of you who didn't complete all of the assignments. That's okay. I mean, if you miss one assignment, because there's so many, it's not gonna have an enormous impact on your grade. But that's something maybe we can work on a little bit. But for the vast majority of you, you completed all the assignments. And everyone did really, really well. So that's good news. So excellent job, everyone. Great job. Yeah, I mean, hopefully, I mean, I went through some of these assignments myself as well. And you know, they're not too challenging. Hopefully they didn't take a lot of time to complete. So yeah, so getting to this announcement, next week, we will not have the live lecture on Tuesday. So Tuesday follows a Monday schedule. So our next class will not be on Tuesday. We are going to move it up into Thursday. So the live session for next week will be on Thursday instead of Tuesday. Yeah, so that's just a reminder. But I'll also send out an email next week to remind you again. And then the week after that, just so you know and you're aware, we're going to have our midterm, but we'll talk a bit more about that next week. Obviously, it's going to be on the first several chapters that we covered, and the content of the exam will only be on the material I actually cover in the lectures. So the textbook does get into some content that I don't cover in the lecture. You won't be tested on that. So so you want to refer to the lectures in order to study for the exam. But we'll talk about more of that on next week. So this is the agenda for today. We're going to talk about strategic positioning and the whole strategic management process. And we will get into the first couple of steps of that process, and we will complete the process with the pre-recorded lecture that I'll upload later in the week. So the question that we are going to answer today is, can a company maintain a sustained competitive advantage? In other words, can they generate large investment returns consistently? Can they generate large profits consistently? And I think one of the answers that someone's suggestion is no. And you know, according to neoclassic economic theory, the answer is no. And the reason why is because competition will eventually eliminate any advantage that a company develops. So if a company comes out with like a unique product or something that they're able to generate a large profit from, eventually other companies are going to become aware of this and they're going to duplicate what they're doing. And so they'll start eating into the profits that they were generating, the market share that they were able to establish. So that with the assumption of perfect competition based on neoclassic economic theory, the answer to the question is no. I mean, eventually competition will whittle away any kind of advantage that you generated because, you know, what you're doing is public and they'll be able to replicate it. They'll see what you're doing and they'll copy or do a version that's even better. However, when we look at the marketplace, we do see companies that are able to achieve large profits and large returns for a very long time. Right now, there's this subjective question of what constitutes a sustained competitive advantage. You know, how many years are you gotta sustain it for? That's sort of an open question. But I do think that we see, to the surprise of neoclassical economists, companies that are able to generate large returns and very strong market positions for a very long time. Right, and if you look at the dominance, let's say, of Apple, you know, they've been generating enormous profits for a very, very long time. Google and search, right? They've been generating profits, enormous profits, and they have enormous market share for a very, very long time. And so the economists, their early theories suggested that no, it's not possible, right? Competition is going to eliminate these inordinate sort of returns. But strategy scholars said, well, no, they can. Companies actually can generate large returns. And so then now the question is, how is it, what explains that? And strategy as a field, I think is, you know, dedicated, their focus is really about this question about what is it that enables companies to generate a sustained competitive advantage. And so one idea that's on the table here, I think, in the chat is product differentiation, keep them out of the perfect market. So we're going to get into exactly what enables a company to achieve this. And it's maybe not entirely clear, right? There is no exact blueprint. Otherwise, everyone would have, you know, enormous investment returns. Product differentiation might be one strategy, right? But then the question becomes, well, why can't any other company just copy those products, right? So, you know, can't all companies differentiate, right? If that's the key to success. And so that's what strategy attempts to answer. Why is it that they are seeing, you know, in the real world, companies that are doing really well for a very long time? And the name most associated with strategy is Michael Porter. The textbook, if you read the chapter, the textbook paints Michael Porter as this very famous strategist, the most famous sort of business scholar. And I think that might be true. He's at the Harvard Business School. His ideas are very well known. And he's developed this idea called strategic positioning, which is the way, it's his explanation for how companies are able to achieve sustained competitive advantage. You know, so you know, biology, they have Charles Darwin. Physics, I don't know, they have Einstein. Computer science, maybe, I don't know, Alan Turing. business, we have Michael Porter, right? He doesn't have quite the celebrity status, I think, of a Darwin or an Einstein, but he is our version of Darwin and Einstein. He's pretty popular. I mean, he's very popular within business scholars, certainly within the management field and consultants. You know, he's very well known, and his ideas are very well known. They're part of the seminal papers that you read when you become a strategy scholar. And his basic idea is that firms are able to establish a competitive advantage, a sustained competitive advantage by performing different activities from their rivals or performing similar activities in different ways. So they're doing something that makes the company distinctive. There's something special about the company. And he has these three principles that he developed, which is sort of a framework that you might use in order to qualify whether some position a company takes is a strategic position that allows for sustained competitive advantage, right? And so this is sort of the key or the secret to, you know, becoming an Apple or becoming a Google, becoming like one of these massive companies that's able to sustain a competitive advantage and dominate in the marketplace, right? And resist all of those competitive market forces that want to eat away at all of that, you know, money that you're generating. And so his three principles is that you have to create something that's unique and valuable, right? And so clearly this is, you have to be doing something that no one else is doing, right? What that is, we'll clarify in a little bit. But it also has to be valuable, right? You can't just do something unique. If the market isn't interested in your unique idea, then it's not going to generate any returns for you. It has to have trade-offs. And so in Porter's paper where he describes this idea, he uses Neutrogena as an example. And Neutrogena is this company, like they sell facial care products. They're in like sort of wellness and beauty. But they have a distinct position within the marketplace where their products are supposed to be healthy, like for your skin. And what Porter argues is that by establishing yourself as that kind of company, where it's more of a health company, that you're no longer going to be one of these sort of perfume companies, right? So you're not putting on moisturizers or putting on stuff onto your skin so that it smells good. You're putting it on because you want to improve the health of your skin. And the other thing is fit. This unique position that you're establishing, not only does it have to be, you know, valuable, not only does it have to require trade-offs, which is something if you do it, that means you can't do something else. It has to have a fit within your company. It has to fit within the capabilities and resources that your company has. And so when I think about this, I think about the company Dyson. Is anyone familiar with the company Dyson? Have they heard about this company? D-Y-S-O-N. Yes. Yeah. And so, and what is it that they do? What do they make?
Hair dryers,
Vacuums. Exactly. Yes. And so, and I think you would identify Dyson with vacuums. And so they've created a niche within that industry. They created a unique and valuable position within the industry in creating these very high quality, sophisticated vacuums. But they decided recently to diversify. And not only are they going to make vacuums, but they were also going to make electric cars. Now, there is, you know, bells should be going off when someone presents this idea to Dyson, because you would question immediately whether there's a fit between vacuum cleaner manufacturers and companies that manufacture electric cars. And so I guess at some point the owner of the company was convinced that there might be a fit, but it failed, and they wasted a lot of money in trying to launch an electric car. And I think one of the reasons why is because it just wasn't a good fit with their capabilities and their resources. So that is another key. And so those three sort of principles are the pathway, in a very general sense, toward dominating in the marketplace and establishing yourself as a company that can generate the sustained competitive advantage and inordinate investment returns. And so we're going to get into detail on how this process actually works, but as a way to illustrate it, I am going to use Oculus Quest, Facebook's Oculus Quest, as an example. And in fact, I just want to, let me take a poll real quick. Wait, where do I got my polls? Are we able to, okay. Okay, so I'm going to launch this poll. And what I would like to know is how many of you are familiar with the concept of virtual reality. Have you heard of virtual reality? Have you heard of, are you familiar with virtual reality products? So let me just launch this poll real quick. Okay. Maybe one or two. Okay, I will shut this down. Anyone's on the fence? Okay, there we go. All right. I'm going to end the polling and I will share the results. So surprisingly, at least surprising to me, most of you are familiar with virtual reality. And it's surprising because it's very sort of early days for this industry. It hasn't hit sort of mainstream appeal or mainstream success. But that's interesting. So 90% of you are familiar with virtual reality. Let me stop sharing. So let's see. Okay. Yeah, so I think virtual reality, gamers and weebs would know. Yes. So right now it's positioned largely as a way to, it's as a new platform for gaming. And that might be its early entrance way into sort of like a mass market appeal. But I believe that virtual reality, not Facebook's Oculus Quest in particular, but virtual reality in general, maybe, and I don't think that I am overstating this, I don't think I'm being hyperbolic, but this may be the most significant development in humanity's history. So why do I say that? You know, clearly this is a device for gamers. And I think the reason why is because eventually this device, and so for those of you, so for a couple of you who don't know what virtual reality is, as you can see in this picture, this woman, she has a device on her face, and in there is a screen. And so when you put this headset on, you're able to peer into a new world in 3D, right? And so in this world, and it's a computer-generated world, right? So there's screens in that headset. In this computer-generated world, you're able to walk around it, you're able to look around, you're able to interact with the objects in this world. So it's almost like you are entering a new reality, right? This is a digital created reality, but it's a different reality. And for those of you who have actually used one of these devices, it has a pretty powerful effect on you. And there's lots of videos on YouTube which shows people trying virtual reality for the first time. It's pretty powerful when you put the device on and all of a sudden you're just looking into a new world. And I think that this is important for a couple of reasons. For one, eventually this device the form factor will get smaller and smaller and smaller. Within a few years, maybe 10 years, I don't really know, no one really knows. That headset will be in the same form factor as my eyeglasses, right? It'll be that thin, that lightweight. It'll be something that someone can wear constantly. And so most people believe that now this will be the new computing platform, because people will wear virtual reality headsets constantly throughout the day, right? Continuously throughout the day. And so they'll wear these glasses, and by wearing these glasses, it will enable you to peer into a world that you digitally create, so that it gives you the power of recreating the reality that you live in, right? And so, you know, if you live in a small apartment, for example, when you put on your virtual reality headset or your glasses, your eyeglasses, you can transform your apartment into a 50,000 square feet penthouse, right? You can put it on top of a cliff or on top of a building overlooking Central Park, right? And the graphics will eventually get to the point where and they're almost there right now, where they are photorealistic, which means when you put on these glasses, what you see that's digitally created, your digitally created world, will be indistinguishable from the physical world, right? There'll be no difference whether you're wearing glasses or not. But when you put the glasses on, right now you can see a world of your own creation. So, you know, if you wanted to have a pet dragon flying around your house, you know, you can have that. And so, I think that eventually we will get to the point where everyone is wearing these glasses continuously, and living in, you know, worlds of their own creation. And then if you think about sort of projecting down the future, and this would be on the order of maybe decades or a century, these devices become more powerful. They will enable you to experience realities in more sort of realistic ways. They will become more immersive, right? And so now, not only do you see things perfectly in this virtual world, but you hear things that are indistinguishable from the physical world. You'll be able to touch things, so there'll be haptic feedback. And then you may get to the point where you don't even have to wear glasses and headphones and like haptic suits, because all like what your eyes do is your eye will detect light, right? And will transform that light into an electrical signal that your brain is able to read, and then your brain generates an image for you, right? Same thing with hearing. You know, your ears detect you know, waveforms in the air, changes that to an electrical signal that's sent to the brain that your brain interprets as a sound. Same thing with touch. And so the idea is that you can skip over all of these sort of somewhat crude sensors that we have in our ears and our eyes and our fingertips and everything else, and you can just send the electrical signal directly to your brain, right? Now the fidelity of that experience when you're sending the, you know, precise electrical signals to your brain, now you can generate experiences that are completely indistinguishable from physical reality. So when you enter the virtual world, there's really no difference. There's nothing that you're trading off or that you're leaving behind from the physical world, right? It will generate, you know, a perfect sort of replica of what you would experience, all of the different sensations in the physical world. And then you might think that in the future, and eventually we'll get to strategy, this is all going to tie in. In the future, you might imagine how not only will this device have full control over the electrical signals being sent to your brain, so it can recreate these new realities for you. But someone may come up with this idea that, hey, you know, wouldn't it be cool is when you enter the virtual world, not only will the experience be sort of indistinguishable from what you experience in the physical world, with the benefit of having, you know, full control over what happens in this virtual world, but that it will block your memories of the physical world, right? And so when you enter the virtual world, right, it will have the same kind of fidelity as your physical world, but you'll forget that you actually live in the physical world, right? And so when you enter the virtual world, all you know of is that existence. You don't really know that you exist in the physical universe while this sort of device is running. And I bring this up, and I think part of the reason why I think this is such a profound technology is because eventually we'll be able to do that. And that model of existence, of entering a world without any memories or of what happened prior to it, is an explanation of what we experience now in the physical world. So the argument is often made that perhaps really in this physical world is not quite a physical world, it's a virtual world that we are experiencing, and that, you know, our consciousness resides in some other, you know, base reality that's wearing some sort of very advanced VR device. All right, so I'll get off my rant about VR. Yes, you should check out, that's right, yeah, so there's lots of, so philosophers have actually been talking about this for thousands of years. You know, even early Greek philosophers have thought of this idea that perhaps, you know, we live in another base reality and that everything that's being fed to us is some sort of image produced by that base reality that we don't really have access to. The cave, the allegory of the cave by Plato or Aristotle is one of the early ideas on this. And then philosophers ever since then have talked about this. The Matrix movie talks about this idea. So yeah, so that world, right, where we're able to, you know, recreate our realities and enter these new realities and replicate the experience of being born into the physical reality, that's coming. And the very beginning process, I think, is these devices. So I think that this is a very important business. It's a very important product, and it's a lot of fun. I don't know if you're interested in like gaming and things like that. It's really fun to sort of experience, and so check it out if you can. All right. So, anyways, so Facebook is now into this business, and they bought. So they got into this business by buying OCULUS for $2.3 billion in 2014. So Facebook's very serious about virtual reality, right? They spent over $2 billion getting into this business. OCULUS was a company that was making VR devices. They were a small, independent company. They first launched on Kickstarter, and then Facebook eventually bought them for a little more than $2 billion. Facebook sort of is phasing out the product that they initially developed, and now they developed their own virtual reality headset called the Quest, which was the second generation of the Quest, was just launched a couple of weeks ago. So we're going to use Facebook's Oculus Quest, and hopefully I've established the importance of this industry and this product. We're going to use this as an example as we go through what it means to establish a strategy for a company. So establishing a strategy will be done at multiple levels within the company. So there'll be a strategy set at the corporate level, the business level, and the functional level. I think this is a better way of sort of illustrating that, and this is just a diagram of the three levels. So the corporate level is at the very highest level. And so Facebook's VR strategy at the corporate level is they decided that they want to connect 1 billion users in virtual reality. So that was sort of the goal established at the corporate level. And then the business level, which is the level below that, has now have to translate that strategy into their own strategy in order to realize that goal. And so the business strategy at Facebook for their VR efforts, in order for them to actually reach 1 billion users in VR, they figured this device has to be both simple and it has to be affordable. And then within each one of these business level strategies, you will have a functional level strategy. And an example of a functional level strategy will be, let's say, marketing, right? And so they developed the Oculus Quest because they believe that this is a very simple and affordable device that will appeal to the masses. And so a functional strategy now is how we're going to market it to the masses. And one way they do that is they introduce the product at their conference. And so a lot of tech products are first introduced at tech-related conferences. And some of the big tech companies have their own independent conference, and Facebook is one of those companies. And so they introduced it a couple of weeks ago at their, what they call Facebook Connect. So that's like sort of like a big picture look at what a strategy looks like. And so you have Porter's sort of 3 principles that orient your thinking on what the strategy is going to be. And then these strategies are going to be devised at the different levels of the company. This diagram here is something that I introduced to you last week. This is an overview of the strategic management process. So this is the complete picture. And these are all the steps that you will take when you actually conduct a strategy. And so we'll just go through them. We're not going to get through all of them today. We'll get through the first couple, and then the last 3 I will finish up in the pre-recorded lecture, which is part 2 of this chapter, and that will be available by the end of the week. So here it says, step 1, establish the mission, vision, and value statements. And this is something, you know, we covered to death last week, right? The first step in your planning process, right, when you're setting goals, is to establish that mission, vision, and values. That sort of grounds the company in a very particular direction and defines who they are, with who they're going to be within the marketplace, and it sort of guides their behavior and should guide their overall strategy. And then so based on that, you want to establish goals that you're going to pursue. Your strategy is going to be the means which you use to determine which goals you're going to pursue, right? So you're going to pursue goals that align with your company's strategy. And so keeping with our Oculus Quest example, if we look at Facebook, Facebook's mission and vision statements are to get people the power, or to give people rather, the power to build community and bring the world closer together. That's their mission. Their vision is people use Facebook to stay connected with friends and family, to discover what's going on in the world, and to share and express what matters to them. And you can see that this is, you know, this is what would be a mission and vision statement for a company that's involved in social networking. And so the reason why they got into VR is because they believe it aligns with their mission and vision. And that is, they believe VR to be the next platform that enables people to connect, right? Because if you have family, or, you know, relatives or friends, or even coworkers that are far away, for example, virtual reality is a way to meet up with them, right? And so everyone could put on their VR devices, and you can have avatars that sort of you inhabit that even look identical to you, and you can meet in a virtual space. And so it will replicate, you know, unlike what we're using right now in Zoom, which is this flat screen, like I see little squares, you know, when people have their video turned on, like all I really see is this little cropped 2D picture. It's very difficult to establish any kind of connection through this medium. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I sort of limit my attempt at create an engagement within this class, because I just think it's difficult to achieve given the limitations of this medium. But VR breaks all of that down. VR is able to replicate what it would be like meeting someone in physical space. So it is a way of connecting across long distances in a way that can be really engaging. And you're right, yeah. So some of the comments I'm looking at in the chat, it would be really cool, absolutely. You know, this software is being developed. There's early versions of it right now. Facebook has what they call the Infinite Office, which is, you know, a way of doing work in a VR environment that brings people together like you would in a physical environment. And so, yeah, I mean, it would be great if this technology was really established, you know, given our pandemic circumstances. Yeah. And then an earlier comment that I think I missed, there's a bunch of sci-fi stories getting stuck in the VR. Yeah, I mean, you know, look, an open question is, are we currently stuck in a VR? We don't know, right? You know, one of these themes is the brain in a vat theme, which is the idea that, you know, some, I don't know, evil organization or something took our brains, because really everything that we experience is our brain. Everything else are just sort of sensors that feeds data to our brains. So if you were to just take the brain and keep it in a vat of some sort so that it doesn't die and just feed it signals, right? That might explain really what we are at the base level, that we are just some brain in some vat, you know, that someone's feeding like data signals. This is another theme that's talked about, you know, among sort of philosophers and creative thinkers about this. So I am familiar with Neuralink by Elon Musk. And so Elon Musk, the very famous entrepreneur who owns Tesla and SpaceX, the Boring Company, also owns a company called Neuralink, where he's looking to create a device that enables your brain to directly connect to computers. And this is an invasive device, right? So he's literally going to implant wires into your brain so that there would be a two-way communication between your brain and this computer. And if you think about it, the way we communicate with people is this sort of very crude mechanism, right? We have to form a thought, we have to convert that into language that clearly expresses what we're thinking, right? Then we have to say it, and it's really like a slow process. So it's really cumbersome to sort of communicate ideas from brain to brain, because it's got to go through all of this process. And so Elon's thinking in part is that this increases the bandwidth. If we can connect directly to brains, right, then immediately from thought, it gets communicated in a form that a computer can read. Also, he believes that technology, like AR technology, is going to outpace human intelligence, and they will become the dominant species on this planet. And so in order to prevent that, and we don't, you know, become ants to these future, you know, AR machines, you know, super intelligent machines, that we have to merge with them. And so that this would increase our cognitive capabilities, which will enable us to keep up with the ever-increasing power of computers. So this is, right. So this is a device that does this, but also this device will enable us to, it's two-way communications. So the computer can feed information to the brain that the brain can read. It would be a direct electrical signal. So this would be part of these devices that enable you to have complete and full virtual reality immersion. Yeah, and so this is the beginning of it. You know, it's very early days, but eventually we will get there. Yeah, he made PayPal. That was, you know, one of his earliest companies where he made, you know, his initial sort of big payday. Yeah, I mean, so there are camps that believe AI is very dangerous, and that it could be the end of humanity. Others, there's others who sort of dispute that, but this is sort of an open debate. Elon Musk falls in the camp that he sees AI as an enormous threat to humanity, and that the way to sort of combat this threat would be to merge with these machines. And his Neuralink company is making really impressive strides in that direction. So getting back to strategy, so you can see that Facebook established itself as a way for people to connect, and their goal, their corporate goal, and let me get back to it. Here we go. Their corporate goal, connect 1 billion users in virtual reality. You can see how that aligns with their mission and vision, and it has to. They have to match, right? There has to be a sort of coherent, cohesive message between all of these different parts of the company. Okay, so step one of the strategy process is you establish your mission, vision, and values. Step two is you have to do an assessment of the current reality. And that's basically looking at where your organization stands internally and externally to determine what works and what does not, right? So where is it, where are these different places can we establish a sustained competitive advantage? Where is it that we can create a strategy to sort of achieve that? And there's different tools that you can use in order to do that assessment. So the examples are in orange here. So a SWOT analysis, forecasting, benchmarking, Porter's model for industry analysis, competitive intelligence. So what we're going to do now is just to complete step two in assessing current reality, go through a couple of these tools. So the first, and this is very popular, it's called the SWOT analysis. SWOT is an acronym which stands for your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so for each of these 4 items, essentially you would list, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. Another way of thinking about it is SWOT identifies the good and bad both inside and outside of the company. And so if we were to do a SWOT analysis for Facebook's VR efforts, the S, or the strengths would be your internal strengths. And so, what is it that your company can harness that will enable it to achieve this goal of connected 1 billion users? And so what I listed here is its financial resources. Facebook has an absolute ton of money. It's a very, 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 very wealthy company. So they have access to a ton of money, and they also have an enormous customer base, right? They have billions of customers, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a future slide. The W is, what is their weakness? So when you look internally about what weakness exists for Facebook, I think it's this whole thing with fake news and privacy. That is a real concern for Facebook's brand. They have a product that are making a lot of people very, very upset. So that is definitely a threat. That is rather a weakness in their company, and should be a concern. So what are the now external opportunities? And the external opportunities that I think VR is the next computing platform. I think, in the way that we sort of progressed from desktops to laptops to cell phones, I think the next step after cell phones will be some sort of wearable device. So like a VR or an AR unit. I think that's the next computing platform. And so that represents, if you can become sort of like the next cell phone, that would represent an enormous opportunity. And what is their external threats? I think one of the external threats that they face is criticism and scrutiny by the government. So certainly governments across the world are looking to further regulate Facebook as a company. And that's a pretty significant threat to their business. There's even calls by some to break them up because they're too powerful. et cetera. So that would be a SWOT analysis of Facebook. Does anyone have any questions at this point about anything that we've covered? Strategies, using a SWOT analysis to assess current circumstances. Okay, good. All right, yeah, a lot of this is pretty straightforward. So hopefully you're getting it. So the textbook lists this as another way of assessing competitive, assessing sort of your standing within the industry. So this is another tool that uses a acronym. So this is VRIO. But within the literature, so Porter, one of Porter's seminal papers was establishing that that firms do have an impact on their success, right? And that what happens at the firm level regarding their performance, it has a bigger impact on their performance than what happens at the industry level. In other words, what he was able to establish is that performance is more attributed to what the actual firm does, the decisions that they make, the way that they compete within a market, that has a bigger impact on their performance than industry, right? And so, and it goes back to the initial question of whether you can create a sustained competitive advantage, and evidence suggests that you can, and there are things that you can do as a company to do that. You're not just at the mercy of your industry. You're not just at the mercy of competition, market forces. You're not just at the mercy of, you know, the economic cycle. That success, certainly all of those have an definitely have an effect, right, on your success as a company. But an even greater impact comes from what you do as a company. And so that's what Porter essentially established in his one of his seminal papers. But then the question is, okay, so what is it that companies are going to do? And so Porter, comes up with this idea that it's your competitive, your strategic position, and he has this thing called the 5 forces model, which I'm going to talk about in the recorded lecture. That's sort of the second half of this chapter. So he created these tools, but his idea is that what you need to do is position yourself correctly within your industry. So it's an assessment of sort of like the competition and market forces, and orient yourself, based on that. But there's another sort of stream of thinking in this field, and these other scholars are part of what's known as the resource-based view, and they believe that what determines your strategic sort of advantage, what creates or generates a sustained competitive advantage, is the resources and capabilities that your firm has. And so the very famous name, I think his name is just as famous and popular as Michael Porter, is Jay Barney. And Jay Barney is associated with the resource-based view. And so it's sort of, look, at the end of the day, and this goes back to really our first lecture where I talked about postmodernism, any one theory is only going to give you a slice of reality. It's going to give you access to just a slice. It's not going to give you the whole big picture. And so one of the things that I suggested to you is that given our sort of postmodern take on the world now, where we are questioning some of these foundational principles established by modern science, is that we shouldn't go all in on a particular theory, and it could be misleading in some ways to do that. And so the best sort of strategy yourself in best understanding the world is to expose yourself to many different theories. And on any theory, you always have to ask, not whether this works or it doesn't work, but under what conditions does this work? And so that should be sort of your operating framework that you use to sort of analyze any kind of theory that you're introduced to, or business strategy or business idea, competitive idea that you're introduced to. That any one idea is only going to give you a limited view of the world. You want to expose yourself to lots of different ideas. And any one of these ideas, you always have to ask, okay, it works, yes, but under what conditions does it work? And under what conditions does it not work? And so I would say the strategic positioning is, it does work. It does explain part of the outcomes of firms that do sustain a competitive advantage. But their resources and capabilities is also part of that explanation. I don't think that they are sort of competing views, which is the way that they are presented often. And so the basic idea is you want to analyze what you offer based on whether it's valuable, whether it's rare, whether you can copy it, and whether your organization has the means to take advantage of it. And so if you look at Facebook's VR efforts, I think that they do have a resource that's very valuable, and that is their social networking platform. They have 2.6 billion active monthly users, and that is a resource which I think meets all of the 4 criteria. Having 2.6 billion active users is very valuable, right? Because they can sell to those users. They can sell their VR vision to them. So it's incredibly valuable. It's rare. There aren't that many companies that have 2.5 billion customers. It's very difficult to imitate. Not just any company, can grab itself 2.5 billion customers. And clearly Facebook's been very successful. So they have the organizational capabilities to take advantage of that resource. And so I think that given this sort of VRIO assessment, I think they are very well positioned, Facebook, as a company to generate a sustained competitive advantage using virtual reality and producing these virtual reality devices. So we'll sort of wrap up around here. Let me see. So there's other tools that you can use in order to assess your competitive standing. In addition, I like VRIO. This is sort of the resource-based view. But others is forecasting. Forecasting is something that you have to do. Every business does it, and forecasting is just projecting into the future. Other versions of this are trend analysis, contingency planning. You can read the definitions here. Forecasting, though, is, what is the VR industry going to look like in the future? And if you buy into the assumption that it's the next computing platform, then its future looks very, very bright. It looks like this is going to be, a multi-billion dollar industry. I mean, it already is right now, but the growth should be enormous. It probably be on the order of hundreds of billions of dollars. So the future, I think, looks bright for virtual reality. And so that's another way of sort of assessing your competitive standing. And then another is benchmarking. And benchmarking is just comparing where you stand against the best that you would be competing against, right? And there's lots of things within your company that you can benchmark. The example here that I gave was their actual product. And so benchmarking Facebook's VR product, and their VR product, the device that they actually produce, is called the Oculus Quest. And to benchmark that product, you would want to compare it against other VR headsets that are currently in the market, and you want to look at the best ones and see how they compare against them. And this is up for debate, but the Reverb G2 is one of the best VR headsets that you can get. And when you compare the Quest against it, some of the, and this would be a technical version of benchmarking, but if you look at sort of the capabilities of the device itself, field of view is just, when you look through the headset, how big is the image that you see? Are you able to see the entire world? Does it cut off your peripheral vision? And obviously you want a full view of the virtual world. You want to be able to see entirely in your virtual vision. Devices right now, though, aren't quite there just yet. So it's sort of cut off. So the screens that you look into are not as large as they eventually will be. So the larger the field of view, the better. And so when you compare the Quest to the Reverb, it has a similar field of view. The resolution of the screen is very high quality, which it has a similar resolution to the Reverb. But the Oculus Quest is a standalone device, which means it has a computer built into it. You don't have to plug the device into a computer. The Reverb has to be plugged into a computer. So not only do you need to buy the Reverb, but you also have to buy a capable computer. When you buy the Oculus Quest, everything's all in that one device. You just strap it onto your head and you're good to go. You turn it on. You don't need another computer. And so that is a powerful aspect of that device. And when you look at the price, it's half the price. So the Oculus Quest is just $300. The Reverb costs $600. So you're getting an inferior device in the Reverb, but it costs you twice the amount. And so when you benchmark the Quest against the competition, it really blows the competition away. And it was actually, when they introduced this product 2 weeks ago, it was really very surprising to the VR community that they were introducing this product that had such sort of powerful compute and had really impressive specs that compare favorably against the best headsets on the market, but they're offering at half the price. So there's no other company, I believe, and we're going to get into more specific strategies in the pre-recorded lecture, but their goal, Facebook, is to go for a wide audience, right? So they want to mass market this device. They're not interested in serving a niche audience. They're interested in serving billions of people. And you can see their corporate strategy is to connect 1 billion people in virtual reality. In order for them to do that, they need to do this. They need to, they need to compete well on price, and they need to offer a very high quality product, and it needs to be simple. And I think that they achieved all of that. So it'd be interesting to see how well the Oculus Quest does. And they're very well positioned because I don't think that there's any other company that can do what Facebook is doing in VR. You can't offer this kind of device at $300. They must be taking a loss on it. I'm not really sure. And that, I'll leave it there. That is the last of the slides. So I'll open the class up for any questions that you might have. There's one in the chat. Do you have a VR setup? And of course I do. It's probably not going to surprise anyone. I do. I have a couple of devices. I probably will get this Oculus Quest. It comes out next month. Yeah, so I think it's interesting. I'm not really a gamer though. I wish I was. I'm not really a gamer. I'm just really interested in the tech and the progression of the tech, and I want sort of a first-hand account of where the tech is at. So yeah. What do you usually do with the VR set? So for me, I do sometimes play games, but I'm not really like a gamer, so I'm not really doing it that often. There's also like VR experiences, like so you can visit like vacation destinations. VR movies are just starting to come out. There's a few of them. I think that's the future of movies. So a VR movie, and they had this they did an episode of The Walking Dead in VR, and it's not just giving you a 360 view, it's actually placing you in the 3D world. And so in this episode of The Walking Dead, and The Walking Dead is a TV show about zombies, you're literally in the world, right? And so you're being chased by zombies, and so you strap on this headset, and then I found myself underneath a car. And, and I'm looking around and I see, zombies, and it's a movie, so they're real. So this is not, digitally generated. This is very authentic, very real, and very scary. It was a very scary experience to put on this VR set and find myself underneath a car with a bunch of zombies trying to reach in underneath me, and then I get dragged out, and so it's an experience that is really cannot be replicated on a 2D screen. And I think once you go VR, once you go 3D, it's very difficult to go back to the 2D world. And so I think the future of movies, I think it's the future of games. It is very interesting. I think you all should give it a try at $300. It's somewhat affordable because you don't need to get, it used to be that you had to buy a headset for $600 and then plug it into a $2,000 computer because it requires extra compute resources to render VR video. So it was very, very expensive and it was very complicated. You needed sensors to track, the headset movements. But now you get one simple device and everything's built in. It's very simple. You press a button and you're entering a virtual world. So what do I think about dying in VR? I'm sure there are some risks. So like literally dying or your VR character dies? So literally dying. Yeah, I mean, look, it's a very powerful experience. And so it could be therapeutic. So I mean, if, for people who are at sort of the end of life, and maybe perhaps know that they're dying, this may be a way of making that experience a little bit more pleasant. There's definitely been studies on the therapeutic effects of VR. It's great it's really, really effective for exposure therapy. So if you have anxiety, any kind of fear, so things that respond well to exposure therapy, VR is a very effective sort of therapeutic tool to gain improvement on those. And in fact, it sort of cured, it cured my fear of flying. I used to hate flying and I got to fly all over the place. And so, I needed to get over that fear. And when you put on a VR device and you're in a plane that's flying, it feels like the real thing, And so if you do enough of that in the safety and comfort of your own home, you get very used to flying. And same thing with heights. There's lots of VR experiences where you're very high up, and I'm deathly afraid of heights, but not so much anymore. And it's because of all of the exposure in VR. So it's helped me with that. What in your brain and some of your pain and shock. So, yeah, so if you're being ripped apart, look, it's going to have an effect. Would it scare you to death? Perhaps for some people, yeah. You can always rip the thing off. Future generations of this, when they're tapping directly into your brainstem, I don't know how easy it is to turn that off button off, but right now you can always rip that thing off. So I don't know if it's too dangerous, but it's definitely going to have a powerful emotional effect on you without question. Yeah, it did. It did. Yeah, thank you. So if any of you also have any kind of, anxieties, fears that that exposure therapy is effective in treating, VR is a way to do it. All right, so we will wrap up there. Thank you, everyone. And again, as a reminder, no class next Tuesday. We will meet next Thursday. I will send out an email as a reminder. But also, that's it. That's it. And I'll stick around for a couple of minutes if any of you have any, how much is Facebook? So full disclosure, I do not work for Facebook. They're not paying me anything. I am an advocate of VR in general. Look, maybe I'm a little bit too hyped up after their Connect conference 2 weeks ago when they introduced the Quest. It was very impressive. I think what they're doing is very impressive. I think they're the market leader here. It's not the best device you can get. If you have money to burn, you can do a lot better than the Oculus Quest. But as far as reaching a mass market, I think, you know, the Quest is the device that's going to get them as close as possible there. And it's very impressive. I think, you know, they need to be commended for what they did. You should. And I think the Quest is the best of, I mean, if I were to make a recommendation, I would recommend the Quest because it's cheap and it's just so simple. But if you got like, if you're into computers and you got yourself a pretty substantial computer, a very powerful one, look, we can get into what NVIDIA announced last week in their graphics cards, where they have 100% improvement. I can go on a rant for an hour. Yeah, there we go. The GTX 3080. I think so. The 3090, I think, is going to give you the ability to run, you know, 4K graphics in a full field of view. And so I think that the GTX 3090 is actually a very important graphics card. And if you got that kind of money, we're talking maybe $5,000–6,000 to put that system together. But, you know, it's as close as you're going to get to fully entering the matrix. That's true. Yeah, right. Look, there's a lot of marketing hype, you know, behind that. Right. You know, so yeah, so it's only some conditions under which they will get that 100% improvement. And you saw the benchmarks, right? So a lot of YouTubers are doing their benchmarks. But yeah, it's definitely a significant leap. It is very sad to be a 2080 Ti owner. I'm not a 2080 Ti owner. But I'll probably get myself a 3090 just so I can like run on the full field of view VR devices. Yes. I need such a powerful computer to run my VR device. So I'm more into VR than I am into gaming. Right, a high quality Zoomer, you know, this is very low quality Zoom, unfortunately. You know, the video's not great. We're not in 3D. So I don't even think it would help. All right, so I am actually going to stop sharing and stop. And stop recording.